out. Everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Lights Out. I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your host, Austin.
And I'm the producer, Daniel.
And we're back with another one, and today's case is probably one of the most disturbing cases I've ever come across.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot, because over the years I've covered a lot of very disturbing stories and cases. And
yeah, I feel like on Lights Out we say that quite a bit, but this one actually
I wasn't ready
is,
for
just
truly how disturbing this this absolute nightmare unfolded in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And this is it's just thinking about it, I'm like already getting just so uncomfortable. We're gonna be talking about probably one of the most monstrous humans ever. I don't understand the depravity. Like, how do you get this sick? I just don't get it.
And how does the system not address that?
That's the other sick part of it too.
Yeah, there's definitely multiple failures here on letting this guy free time and again.
Yeah, a whole family is annihilated. That should have never happened had the criminal justice system not let this monster out. And it's just, I feel like not a lot of things surprise me anymore, but this one just,
this is the worst.
This is the worst. Yeah. And I'm not even being dramatic. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of horrible things that happen here. So forewarning, this is definitely up there when it comes to graphic and disturbing, which we've even toned down a lot of the graphic nature of this, just because it's honestly just things that shouldn't even be said.
Yeah.
It's so depraved and gross that there's no reason to even talk about it in detail. It's just,
and just being sensitive to the victim's family as well.
Right. So this is the story of the Groene family and the horrible things that happen at their home at Wolf Lodge. But let's just go ahead and get into things here. So we're going to be going up to Idaho, Coeur d'Alene. It's a city in the northern panhandle region of Idaho, up near the Washington border. And the city has boomed since the 1990s from increased tourism that was drawn in by the resorts and outdoor activities. You know, there's just so much beautiful land up there in Idaho. I haven't had a chance to go up there and really explore Idaho. Have you been up to Idaho?
No, actually never been up to that area of the U.S. I really haven't.
Same.
Like that area and then the Pacific Northwest. That's really the only area I have yet to go to. But it looks so beautiful out there, really.
Yeah, it's just stunning. And Coeur d'Alene is on this massive lake. So obviously you've got tons of fishing, boating, all that fun outdoor stuff. So really, it's a vacation destination.
Yeah.
People go up there to get away, to, leave the busyness of the city behind and just go enjoy the great outdoors. But in 1986, 21-year-old Brenda Matthews married her then husband, 29-year-old Stephen Groene, who went by Steve, and he was a blues musician. I think he played guitar. He was also a biker. And the year before that, Brenda had given birth to their first child, Vance. After their marriage, Brenda gave birth to 3 more sons, Jesse, Slade, and Dylan. And in 1996, she gave birth to their only daughter, Shasta Groene. In 2002, Steve and Brenda filed for divorce, and reportedly both parents struggled with substance abuse issues. But Brenda moved on and began dating a man named Mark McKenzie. And Mark was known just as that good all-around guy. Everybody liked to be around him. A friend even once described him as Yosemite Sam, which I think is great for picturing what he's like.
Yeah, he kind of almost looks like Yosemite Sam.
Totally, yeah. Too. He's got the mustache going on and everything. Yeah. And he treated Brenda and her children like family, so they all loved him. And due to custody arrangements, Brenda and Steve often fought over the joint custody of their children. Steve worked at a recycling center in Spokane Valley, and he was supposed to have custody of his children every other weekend. But since he was in a band and he played local shows, sometimes he didn't see his children on the designated weekends. He tried to make last-minute plans to see them, and this often caused a lot of arguments between Brenda and Steve. According to the children, they enjoyed spending time with their father. Unfortunately, the custody scheduling put a strain on their parents' relationship. But the kids also saw their mother's boyfriend, Mark, as a father figure. He'd often take the boys out hunting, camping, fishing. He also offered them financial stability as he worked at Spokane Stainless Products for more than 15 years. So he really just treated Brenda's children as his own. And even though they didn't have a whole lot of money, he'd often hunt, trap, and fish to feed his family, which I love that. That's just, it's not an easy thing to go and do.
No, yeah, you just utilizing the resources around you.
Yeah,
it's hard to do.
And go fill your family's freezer.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of water around there, so tons of fish. But Brenda had once worked for a house cleaning business, but once Mark made enough money from a manager promotion, she quit her job to become a homemaker. Mark bought them a house to live in that was once owned by Brenda's family, in fact, and it was connected to Frontage Road near Interstate 90, so it's like right off of the highway here. It was a small cinder block home, just enough to fit everyone inside, and it sat on a large property with a very big yard. Of course, the children loved having this huge yard to play in. They even had a pool, and the house was old-fashioned. It actually had no dishwasher, washer, or dryer, and Brenda even cooked their meals on a propane stove. So very, very simple life, but they really all enjoyed it. I mean, it was a place they could all be together in a beautiful property too, just stunning. It was about 9 miles outside of Coeur d'Alene in a camping area called Wolf Lodge Bay, which is near Lake Coeur d'Alene. The house that Mark bought was one of the few residential properties in the area. So it's not like they're in a neighborhood or anything like that. They're kind of out here on some property with kind of houses spaced out quite a bit between each other. But by 2005, 5 people still lived at the Wolf Lodge Bay house. You have 40-year-old Brenda, her boyfriend, 37-year-old Mark McKenzie, and 3 of Brenda's children. You've got 13-year-old Slade, 9-year-old Dylan, and 8-year-old Shasta. After the divorce, Brenda's 2 oldest sons, Vance and Jesse, had decided to go and live with their father. The younger boys had looked up to Vance and Jesse had taught Slade and Dylan how to play guitar. Slade also loved playing drums and the violin, and just like his father Steve, he just loved music, so they got musical talent in the family. Slade was known as a smart kid. He was on the honor roll at school. He was quiet, but he had plenty of friends and even a girlfriend by the time he was in middle school, whom he loved to spend time with. And as for their youngest son, Dylan, he was a bit shy, but once he was comfortable, he was very sweet and goofy. Brenda often referred to him as her little teddy bear and just loved to snuggle with him. He also loved video games and riding with his dad on his motorcycle. Dylan and his sister, Shasta, were inseparable. Shasta said, "Dylan was my best friend, maybe my only friend." Shasta was the youngest as well as the only daughter of the family, and she loved to paint her nails, do her hair, and play with dolls.
So over the years, the family often had an open door policy, and they let family and friends just come and go when they needed a place to stay. And this also meant they often left their doors unlocked, but they did keep 2 big dogs on the property, and Mark also owned several firearms that he kept inside. And also, they just never really had any reason to worry about their safety out in Wolf Lodge Bay. Again, this house is really isolated. There's really nobody nearby. If you look at pictures of this place.
Kind of far off the highway. Like they had a pretty long driveway. They're kind of set back on their own.
Yeah. And this was, again, more of a camping area, less of a residential area. So it was rare to even really have houses out this way. But on Sunday, May 15th, 2005, Mark and Brenda hosted a barbecue with friends and family. It was a nice day and everyone enjoyed themselves outside. Later that night, Slade returned to his room. Mark went to sleep in one upstairs bedroom. As for Brenda, she fell asleep on the couch in the living room. And Shasta and Dilla had gone to bed in their shared bedroom. Close to sunrise, Shasta was woken up by her mother, Brenda. She wondered if it was time to get ready for school. Brenda said there was a, quote, "man that doesn't want us to be here." Dylan and Shasta then headed into the living room where they saw Slade and Mark tied up on the floor and a strange man wearing black gloves and holding a sawed-off shotgun. The man demanded money from the family, but Mark said they didn't have any. When Mark raised his voice, the intruder told him not to raise his voice or he would shoot him in the head. This intruder then bound the hands and feet of Brenda with zip ties and duct tape and made her lie face down on the floor. The man told them all he was only there for cash and a vehicle. Mark then told him he could take the truck outside and that it would even start without a key. He then zip-tied Shasta and Dylan's hands, led them out of the house, and told them to stay there and be quiet. Shasta watched as the man went back into the home wielding a hammer. She heard her mother try to yell for help, but something cut her off. Then she heard Mark screaming and yelling through a series of loud bangs. Shasta then began crying while still outside and watched as her brother Slade came from around the side of the house. His head was covered in blood and he had gotten out of the bindings that held his feet together. He appeared confused and disoriented from his injuries that were mostly in his head. The man then came out of the home and chased Slade down before bludgeoning him again. This mysterious man then ushered Shasta and Dylan into Mark's truck and fled the home. Shasta looked back one last time and spotted her brother Slade, who had dragged himself to the picnic table out in the yard, and Shasta watched as Slade sat down on the picnic table before slumping over to the side.
So the following day, the closest neighbor, Bob Hollinsworth, came over to the house, and he showed up to pay Slade for mowing his lawn a few days earlier. When he got closer to the home, he started seeing spattered blood all over the front door, and once he saw that, he called the police. And when officers from the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office arrived, they discovered Brenda, Mark, and Slade all dead. They had clearly been murdered, and all three were found inside of the home. It's believed that Slade was still alive for some time after the attack, and as the forensic team traced the path of his blood, it appeared that he went back inside the home after being attacked, went up to his bed, and then went down to be near his mother, where he eventually died. 13-year-old Slade was lying on the floor. His arms were taped and zip-tied behind his back. Duct tape covered his mouth. His head was deformed and resting near the feet of his mother. 40-year-old Brenda was bound the same way as her son, with similar injuries to her head. And 37-year-old Mark was also bound like Brendan Slade and was lying with his feet by Brenda's head. Police said that Mark was unrecognizable from his injuries. He was most likely targeted because he was seen as, the protector in the house, obviously the strongest one, most likely to fight back. The county coroner, Dr. Robert West, confirmed that the victims were bludgeoned to death and died from blunt force trauma to the head. And the coroner suggested that a large framing hammer was used as a weapon, and the victims had been dead for less than 24 hours. The scene was absolutely gruesome, and it was so gruesome that officers took breaks throughout the investigation of the family home. According to Sergeant Brad Maskell of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department, there were blood transfers, drops, and stains throughout the entire house. There were numerous, very severe bludgeoning injuries and a great deal of blood, he said. Only one fingerprint was found on the front door. And so one of the things that really stuck out to them was that all those, there was kind of a small arsenal inside the home. And so in robberies or home invasions in these areas, usually those are all taken.
Right.
But that wasn't the case in the Groening's home. They were still there. So that seemed kind of odd. And also the door was cracked open when they got there.
Yeah.
And
often they had also said that you could hear the family like bustling. So when the neighbor first approached the house, he knew immediately something was wrong because there was not a peep inside the home.
Right. So it didn't take very long for officers to realize that there was two family members that were missing from the home. Shasta and Dylan, they were nowhere to be found. They considered that possibly in the middle, of this attack, perhaps they ran away just to get away, that they might be found hiding somewhere in the surrounding areas, or maybe they had gone off to be with their father, Steve. But when they got a hold of Steve, he said that the children weren't with him, and he was actually devastated by the news, obviously, that all these people that he was close with are dead and his children are nowhere to be found. Law enforcement assembled search teams, including helicopters. They searched the nearby bodies of water, along with the wooded areas and fields with horses and dogs, but they weren't able to find any signs of Dylan or Shasta. After that, an Amber Alert for the missing children was put out, and over 400 acres of land had been searched. So
that's huge. Yeah.
Top to bottom, all around the family home. They looked everywhere, and they were just gone.
Yeah.
One of the services that I think has really been a game changer for myself and so many others out there is telehealth. The ability to get help physically, mentally via, a remote video chat.
I love it.
Is great.
Yeah.
Because, depending on where you live, your schedule, it can be hard to find the time to drive to a physical location and meet up with a doctor or a psychiatrist or therapist and make it all work.
Yeah, I agree.
And usually it's more expensive, too.
Absolutely.
So that's why we're super stoked to team up here with Rula. Rula is really changing the game when it comes to accessibility for mental health services. Basically, you go to rula.com/lightsout. You're going to put in your insurance so that they can match you up with providers who take your insurance. And then it's going to give you options for, do you want to do virtual? Do you want to do in person? Or you can look at both. And then it's going to actually find providers who are available. Rula partners with a network of over 15,000 therapists and psychiatrists nationwide, enabling you to find your personalized solution and the right therapist for you based on your needs, preferences, and state requirements. And you can pay as little as $15 per session, and this is depending on your benefits. Your copay could also be as little as $0 per session. Rula is committed to supporting you and staying with you every step of the way on your mental health journey. From finding the right therapist to helping you schedule appointments and monitoring your progress, Rula is there to help. I love how simple they make this. Sometimes it feels a little daunting, especially when it comes to your mental health. You really want to find a therapist or counselor who you really vibe with, right?
Yeah.
That you feel comfortable with. It's really important to getting the most value out of it.
Yeah.
I know. I've found that to be true.
Yeah. And a lot of people I know of, they spent countless hours and dollars trying to find the right person for them because it's so hard to narrow down sometimes. And I feel like this kind of expedites that process a bit.
Yeah, totally. Or maybe you're somebody who's moved to a new area, or maybe you moved up to college and your normal doctors aren't available to you. Rula is a great way to also just get your medications managed.
Yeah.
They have a psychiatry option as well. So you can really just manage all of your mental health needs all in one place. They make it super simple.
Thousands have already trusted Rula to support them on their journey toward improved mental health and overall well-being. Head on over to rula.com/lightsout to get started today. After you sign up, they ask you where you heard about them, and please show us some support out there. The Lights Out crew, show us some love and tell them our show sent you. Go to rula.com/lightsout and take the first step towards better mental health today, because you deserve quality care from someone who cares. Police discovered that Mark had gotten into an argument with his friend, 33-year-old Robert Roy Lutner, the previous day at the barbecue over money that he owed Brenda. He was also the last known person at the house. So, obviously, Robert became the first person of interest, and they even used Robert's silver Ford pickup as the vehicle description in the Amber Alert, which maybe was not a great call, but they also noticed that he had left town. So it looked highly suspicious, right? When Robert heard that law enforcement was looking for him, he actually went and turned himself into his parole officer's office. It turned out he left town to go to his aunt's funeral, and during a 7-hour interview with police, Robert agreed to a polygraph test, and he passed. Police concluded that Robert had nothing to do with the events that took place in the early morning hours of May 16th. But now that meant law enforcement had no leads, so they kind of turned their attention to Steve Groene.
Which, one of the reasons being, this is obviously a very violent attack that happened, and some would call it a crime of passion. It was so violent with the bludgeoning that they thought this must have been personal. This must have been somebody that knew them. So obviously they're going to go and investigate everybody closest to the family.
Sure.
To make sure.
And it's like, they had gone through a divorce. They were having kind of custody disputes. So they thought maybe there was some motive there. But then you have to consider that this is also Steve's family, right? Like his children as well. So, take that as you will. But they ended up bringing Steve in and they gave him a polygraph test, which he actually failed. We talk about polygraph tests all the time, though, because they're just inaccurate. They don't really...
Especially at this time period, too.
Right. I mean, you could just write this off as horrific stress that this just happened to, his whole family. I don't know. It seems like it's kind of ridiculous that we're still using polygraphs in these situations.
Which they can't hold them because of a failed polygraph. But
no, yeah.
They did put, as we've talked about in other cases recently, they held a lot of credence in polygraph results.
Yeah.
So they're saying.
Yeah.
That's how they basically eliminated suspects.
Right. So since he failed this and just the circumstances, they kept him as their prime suspect because they really had nowhere else to go. The FBI also got involved in the case and noticed that Steve was loosely associated with bikers in the area. So they considered the attack might have been gang-related in some way, especially because some biker gangs performed hammer killings, which I couldn't really find much about this, but that was coming from law enforcement that they had somehow tied hammer killings to this because the perpetrator did use a hammer. But they ended up interviewing Steve countless more times, and early on, Brenda's family members did not believe that Steve was involved in any way. It was also determined that Steve's personal computer was being used at the time of the murders. He also ended up passing a polygraph test later on. So, yeah, polygraph tests are nothing. But I think the fact that Brenda's family members backed him up and obviously his personal computer being used gave him somewhat of an alibi during that time frame.
Yeah, I think, well, they went and they got a warrant and they did a forensic analysis of the computer. And I think after that, they're like, this seems like...
Who else would be using his computer?
Based on the activity, like this is clearly, Steve.
Right. But meanwhile, as they were investigating Steve, the children were still missing and they were still actually being held captive. And investigators figured that their most crucial evidence would depend on whether the two abducted children were still alive. So when forensics confirmed that none of the blood in the house belonged to Dylan or Shasta, they figured the children were possibly still alive. So they needed to find them very quickly. On May 19th, Steve Groene begged for information from the public during a news conference, and he said, quote, "I'd like to address my children's abductors or abductor. Please release my children safely. They had nothing to do with this. Release them in a safe area where law enforcement can find them." Meanwhile, this mysterious man had taken the two children into an area in the woods where he had hidden a stolen rental Jeep. And here he switched vehicles and kept driving because if you remember, he had taken Mark's vehicle, who he said, you didn't have to start the engine with a key. So he had stolen that, went out, exchanged it for this Jeep that he had stolen that was a rental that was somewhere deep in the woods. When he put the kids in there, he threatened to shoot them if they didn't do exactly as he said, and he forced them to start reciting the Lord's Prayer, which is bizarre. If you don't know the Lord's Prayer, that's a very common prayer, but so we're picking up that this guy might be somewhat of a religious zealot. But Shasta said that he'd go back and forth saying that he was there because God told him to be, but then he would also say that he was the devil. Something wasn't right with this guy. He told Dylan and Shasta to call him Jet or sometimes Joe. Sometimes he even made them call him Daddy. Long before this man had ever kidnapped these children, it was very clear that something was seriously wrong with him. And we're about to dive into this guy's history. And yeah, you're about to hear some of the worst shit ever and also the systemic failures that kept letting this guy free. And probably should have seen the red flags pretty early on here. And the system didn't catch it. Or they kind of did, but they didn't do anything about it. So this man was Joseph Edward Duncan III, and he was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina on February 25th, 1963. He was the fourth of 5 children, and his father was in the U.S. Army, and according to Joseph, the family moved around a lot. They changed cities about every 2 years across the U.S. and even Europe at a point. They finally settled down in Tacoma, Washington when Joseph was about 12 years old. And his father found work with the USPS, so he no longer had to work with the military. Joseph's parents then split up about a year after this. According to Joseph's sister, she testified that their mother, Lillian, was physically abusive toward her and her siblings. although their brother denied the abuse, claiming that they just had a quote-unquote difficult upbringing. Their father, Joseph, reportedly had minimal involvement in raising the children. So he's kind of distant. Growing up, Joseph was a loner and only had a few acquaintances. He said that he felt picked on and mocked, especially for how skinny he was, and he spent most of his time either watching TV or daydreaming. Throughout his entire life, he didn't really form any relationships with women his own age. He dropped out of high school in his sophomore year with a 1.7 GPA. He was a paperboy and he worked odd jobs, including lawn work and as an assistant cook at a hospital. Joseph also admitted to using marijuana daily by the time he got to high school, and apparently, according to him, he had also tried LSD, amphetamines, barbiturates, Valium, and PCP.
So all this is happening from a young age.
Yeah.
And, you can already see where this is impacting him mentally.
And I remember our psychopath episode. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The psychopath killer episode. And one of the big things was moving around a lot as a kid. And so like the military family thing, moving around every 2 years kind of destabilizes you. I remember that was a big one.
Yeah. And it just makes it difficult to form meaningful relationships. And then if you're already awkward and not a chameleon, you're going to really struggle. It's going to be really rough.
Kid now. Yeah. Every 2 years.
That's going to be very challenging.
Yeah.
But in 1980, Joseph was arrested, and he's only 17 at this point, for breaking into a neighbor's house, stealing some guns, and then accosting a 14-year-old boy and him at gunpoint. 17.
Yeah.
He then smashed out a storm window and broke into a man's bedroom. He stole 4 pistols, about 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and some pornographic magazines. He said he later wanted to return home, look at the magazines, and masturbate. Instead, he went out searching for a victim, where he found the 14-year-old boy outside of a high school. He then drove the boy out to the woods, made him perform oral sex on him twice, hit him repeatedly with a stick, burned him with a cigarette on his butt, and then let him go. When Joseph returned home, the police were there waiting for him. This incident is reportedly the first time that Joseph was charged with a sex crime. Among other charges, he pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree sex crimes. During his 90-day assessment at Western State Hospital near Tacoma, he detailed a sexual history that began at the age of 8. Allegedly, he performed sexual acts with other female relatives. He told doctors that at the age of 12, he forced a 5-year-old boy to perform oral sex on him. At 15, he said he did the same thing to a 9-year-old boy while pointing a gun at him. So, I don't think there's a way we can confirm this, right? This is just coming from him.
Even a little bit of a spoiler, he ends up saying that he just lies about all this too. He's like, put me back in prison. I just said these things to stay in a mental institution. So take everything that this guy says with, I know we say this a lot on the podcast, but with a grain of salt, because this guy cannot be trusted.
No, it could just be a sick fantasy of his.
Yeah, right.
He even had a blog titled The Fifth Nail. In 2004, he blamed society for creating sex offenders like him. He said this: "There are no bad people in the world, just people who do bad things." And in the blog, he also alleged that he was sexually abused throughout his childhood by various people. He wrote, quote, "I was abused even so often by so many different people growing up that I thought it was like smoking pot. Everyone did it, but nobody openly admitted it." Oh, God. He also made other claims of sexual abuse throughout his life, both on his behalf and others. But again, we have no idea how much of the story can even be trusted or if any of it is true. Because he's known to be a manipulator, as most serial predators are. And he would change his story over time. But what can be trusted is the state hospital records. The following psychological evaluation at a Washington State mental hospital found that he was preoccupied with, quote, deviant sexual fantasies, and, quote, meets the definition of the sexual psychopath.
I mean, that's the most important takeaway from this whole thing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there you go. Hospital officials identified several key indicators common to sexual psychopaths: self-rejection, poor communication and social skills, feelings of failure and inferiority, and dwelling in a fantasy life. The official state hospital report said, quote, "It is important to note that Mr. Duncan did go out looking for victims. At age 15, he had tried to outrun a police car and try to run an officer down. He crashed into a police roadblock and shattered his sinuses in the right side of his face. He was then sent to Tacoma area Boys Ranch for several months. By age 16, he said he had raped 13 young boys at the same time." Clinical director Dr. William Voorhees Jr. and other officials wrote in their report, quote, "This position of power over children has developed into a very powerful and compulsive pattern. Mr. Duncan is not safe to be at large."
Period.
Yeah. So he's being evaluated by mental health professionals, and this is the findings that they're coming up with.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as we go forward.
Yeah.
Already in his young life.
Teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah. And regarding that charge when he was 17, Joseph blamed the on his rejection by his mother and father. He was also upset because his parents had been fighting a lot and were breaking up, because he was doing badly in school, and because he couldn't get into the Air Force due to his auto theft conviction. So from all that, it's very clear he takes no accountability for his actions. He says, "Oh, I only do this because of rejection. I couldn't get in the Air Force. I'm doing bad in school. That's the reason why I did these horrific things." He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but his sentence was suspended, and he was actually then sent over to Western State Hospital. That's where they evaluated him. And this is where he said the, quote, "nightmare of his life began." When he was 19, the state hospital therapist wrote, "After 22 months in the program, Mr. Duncan has shown an unwillingness to modify his sexually deviant behaviors and has chosen not to commit himself to program techniques." They said he showed a, quote, "constant need to maintain secrecy about his fantasies, and he refused treatment."
Refused treatment.
Yeah.
He doesn't want help.
No, he doesn't.
He just wants
accountability and does not want help.
He's feeding off of probably the fear that he's creating around him, that everybody knows he's disturbed. He likes this. He likes that he's this like depraved individual, and he's got all these shocking stories, and
to be the devil.
Yes,
yeah.
That's what he's setting out to be.
Right.
Absolutely.
The state hospital therapists, they actually cited one specific incident. And according to the hospital report, on Valentine's Day 1982, Duncan's mother, Lillian Mae Duncan, came to stay with him at Western State Hospital. They used the hospital's cottage that was meant for family visits, and after she went to bed, Joseph grabbed his coat, gloves, and an extension cord. He jumped over the hospital wall and snuck over to a nearby house where he spied on an 18-year-old woman and then continued on to peek into other houses in the neighborhood. When the dogs began barking, a man spotted him, and Joseph ran back to the hospital's cottage, where he woke up his mother, and then she taught him how to disco dance. Really bizarre. A week later, Joseph said he wanted to leave treatment and instead serve his time in prison. What's odd is that he then recanted his disturbing sexual history, saying he made it all up so he could stay in the sex offender program at Western State Hospital and avoid prison. It became clear that Joseph and his statements could not be trusted. The therapist wrote Pierce County officials, they said this: "He exhibited little remorse or guilt for his sexual deviation while in treatment. He is not safe to be at large. Mr. Duncan is available for transport back to your county by your sheriff at your earliest convenience." So they have stated twice now that this guy should not be out on the streets.
Yep.
Very explicitly. In 1982, he was sentenced to at least 3 and no more than 20 years in prison, and he ended up serving 14 years and was released on parole. He would later serve 3 more years for parole violations. In 1996, after his release, it's believed Joseph murdered 2 girls, half-sisters 11-year-old Sammy Jo White and 9-year-old Carmen Cubias in Seattle, Washington. They were leaving the Crest Hotel on Aurora Avenue and heading to a gas station, and allegedly, Joseph pretended to be the gas station owner. He abducted them, took them into the woods, sexually assaulted them, and bludgeoned them to death. The case eventually went cold. We'll come back to this case a bit later. The following year, in 1997, he murdered 10-year-old Anthony Martinez in Riverside County, California. Joseph spotted him playing behind an apartment building. He called him over, asking him to help look for his cat. Joseph then grabbed Anthony's brother, but Anthony protected his brother, and Joseph ended up abducting Anthony instead. He took Anthony to a nearby canyon, sexually assaulted him, and bludgeoned him to death with large rocks. This case was not connected to Joseph until many, many years later, and we'll also come back to this one as well. But clearly, I mean, they let this guy free immediately as committing murder.
Yeah.
And sexual crimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, he's going on a rampage.
Yeah.
You know, he's got exactly what he wants, which is his freedom to go and do whatever he wants. It's wild that they let him out and they don't even check up on him. They're not even making sure he's, doing right.
Yeah.
He's just out there doing whatever the hell he wants, and he's taking full advantage of that.
Yeah.
This next sponsor is great for somebody who hates cooking, despises it. Maybe you're not good at it. Maybe it's just, you're always burning the bacon, man.
Yeah.
Your house stinks.
Or you just don't have time.
Yeah. A lot of people don't have time. Well, this next sponsor could really help you save money, but also eat really, really good food in 20 minutes or less with literally no cleanup. This is Tovala. Tovala is really changing the game. They're a smart countertop oven and meal subscription that work together to make cooking effortless. They were nice enough to send me one, and I gotta say, I was actually like, wow, this thing's nice. It's like probably about this big, maybe under
a microwave?
1.5 feet. Yeah, it's like a microwave size.
Yeah.
But it does all of these different things. It broils, it bakes, it steams. It's like an all-in-one unit.
Beautiful.
Which is nice. And then basically what you do, they send you, so you pick out your meals online or on the app, and they send it to you, and they're unique because they send them in these little tin trays. So like, for example, I had a macadamia nut crusted salmon.
Ooh.
The salmon was, raw piece of salmon. Very nice. So you just take it out of the packaging, you put it in the pan, and then you poured this little sauce on it. I think it was like a pepper cream sauce.
Okay.
And then you put the macadamia nut crumble on top of it and kind of mash it down. And then what you do is you take the recipe card, you go over to your fancy little oven, you scan it. There's like a QR code on it.
Ooh.
And then it just loads up all of the cooking things. You don't think. There's no thinking involved. You just scan, hit start.
Incredible.
Put it in the oven, and then 20 minutes later, you have perfectly cooked salmon, and it was a risotto with it as well. I was like,
ooh, yummy.
Right. So I had that for lunch.
The future is now, folks.
No, it's very futuristic.
Oh, wait, this is crazy. You can scan store-bought groceries like Eggo waffles, Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, and Amy's frozen meals, and it'll know exactly how to cook them.
Yep.
That's awesome. For a limited time, because you are an avid Lights Out listener, you can save up to $300 on the Tovala Smart Oven when you order 6+ meals by heading to tovala.com/lightsout and use our code LIGHTSOUT. That's 300 buckaroonies there off when you head to tovala.com/lightsout and use promo code LIGHTSOUT.
One last time, that's tovala.com, and make sure, please, that you use our promo code LIGHTSOUT and you get $300 off.
Remember, with Tovala, dinner is taken care of.
But at some point in 97, he did go back to prison for violating his parole. And according to a Washington Department of Corrections psychologist, Joseph constantly struggled with his gender identity and sexuality while incarcerated. After his final release on July 14, 2000, he moved to Fargo, North Dakota, where he registered as a sex offender. Up until this point, Joseph had spent 17 years in and out of prison for all of his crimes: sex crimes, assault, weapon possession, and drug possession. But no murder yet. He's not been in prison for murder.
Nope.
After his final release, former North Dakota State University Police Chief Tim Lee warned Joseph that high-risk sex offenders were statistically likely to reoffend. Yeah, no shit.
Mm-hmm.
North Dakota's risk assessment rated him a level 3 sex offender. Basically, he's at extremely high risk to reoffend.
Yeah, that's the highest rating you can get, I believe.
But yet, he's still getting out.
Yep.
And Joseph said that statistic wasn't going to apply to him. Whatever the hell he meant by that. From a distance, Joseph seemed like he had changed. So here's that manipulation. He's making everybody else think he's changed. He got a job, he made friends, and even went back to school and made the dean's list at North Dakota State University. He even had some healthy hobbies like bike riding and scuba diving, and he had gained the trust of many in his community. But his blog posts often showed that he didn't take any accountability. In March 2004, he wrote this: "The propaganda against sex offenders is getting worse. Soon there will be separate restrooms and drinking fountains for us." He also wrote that he made a pact to, quote, and the guy can't fucking write, so sorry if I flubbed this because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he said, "Make society pay even if it meant I had to die in order to do so. The purpose of my life changed from repairing the damage I caused to causing as much damage to society, which I blame for not letting me heal as possible. Instead of working toward getting better, I would now work toward getting even. I would strive to become the sickest sicko alive, so I could hurt society with the very sickness that it would not let me escape." What does that even mean, dude? They kept sending you to a mental hospital to get treatment,
and you didn't want to,
and you refused it.
Yeah. So he's just blaming, quote unquote, society. That's it. And
because he didn't see anything wrong,
right? Yeah.
With adults and children having inappropriate relationships. That's basically what he's kind of alluding to.
Yeah.
That should not be a crime.
Yeah. And then he's basically saying like, oh, well, because now I'm labeled as a sex offender and I'm being like oppressed,
right? That
I can't change because the world just sees me as a sexual criminal.
Poor me.
Yeah. It's the biggest victim complex in the world, really. But yeah, God, this guy, absolute piece of shit.
It was also around this same time that he began referring to himself by 4 different names. He had Joseph, Joe, Jet, and Jazzy. Sometimes he even referred to himself in the third person. And I think one of those names he got from his prison husband.
Yeah, he did.
I'm sure he had a few of those as well. But in another post, he begged God to give him a sign to not do what he planned on doing. In March of 2005, he was charged with of 2 boys at a playground in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, which that whole incident actually happened on July 3rd, 2004. He then disappeared after an April 5th hearing in Becker County, Minnesota, which is about an hour from Fargo. His bail was set for $15,000 and supposedly a friend bailed him out, which is surprising he even had a friend who would be willing to bail him out. And then he fled town. He bought shoes 2 sizes too big so that if he left footprints behind, they wouldn't match his size because he's so fucking smart. He also picked up gloves, a hammer, a sawed-off shotgun, and his camping gear before heading to Idaho to commit the most heinous crime of his yet. A federal warrant for his arrest was issued on June 1st, 2005 for fleeing, and this was about 2 weeks after the events in Wolf Lodge Bay, over in Idaho, where he murdered Brenda, Mark, and Slade, and kidnapped Dylan and Shasta.
After the murders, according to court documents, Joseph actually confessed to Shasta that he had been watching their home for days. And he first began stalking the family when he drove by the house in Wolf Lodge Bay, where he saw Shasta and Dylan playing in the yard. From then on, he began making plans to break into the home and kidnap the children. He had no prior connections to the family in any way. I mean,
that's terrifying.
For a lot of people, this is a nightmare scenario. Yeah. This is the worst case scenario. It's just some sick freak comes by, sees kids in a yard, and then all of a sudden the worst possible things occur.
Yeah, well, he saw kids in the yard. He saw a house off by itself.
Yeah, isolated. Yeah.
Which I think we'll talk about this a little bit more here in a minute, but...
Yeah. Allegedly, he had previously approached the home one night, but when one of the dogs barked, he fled. He then watched the family during that barbecue that we mentioned earlier to understand who was actually living inside the house. And once he was confident enough, he attacked the family, killing Brenda, Mark, and Slade, and then he kidnapped Dylan and Shasta, just like he had planned. In his stolen rental Jeep, he took Shasta and Dylan to multiple different areas around the rugged country of Lolo National Forest out in Montana, near St. Regis. One location was believed to be an old rundown shack in the middle of the woods. They lived on canned fruit, appetizers, cigarettes, and beer, and when he had to go into town for supplies and food, he would leave Dylan and Shasta chained up inside that shack. He bragged to 8-year-old Shasta about how he had used a shotgun and hammer to murder her family. He also made both Shasta and Dylan write notes to their father, Steve. One said, "Dad, I miss you very much, and me and Dylan know what happened to Mom, Mark, and Slade, and we both feel very sorry for them, and we both miss you, Jesse and Vance, and we might see you guys again." Over the course of weeks, Joseph sexually assaulted Shasta and Dylan multiple times. Shasta later said, "Every single day after the monster took us, he found a new way to torture our minds and bodies. He was the worst kind of evil that anyone could imagine. If I really want to be real, and I think you need to know this, no matter what he did to me, it pales next to what he did to my brother." She had noticed that Joseph was much more violent toward Dylan than he was toward her. Shasta tried to protect her brother, and she tried to keep them both positive over the course of their captivity. Joseph constantly threatened to kill the children, so Shasta began forming plans to keep both her and her brother safe. She feigned compassion and understanding toward Joseph, hoping that it would lessen Joseph's violence against her and her brother. She would ask him about things like his personal life and his family. And this is incredibly smart for an 8-year-old. She saw, even though Joseph is the manipulator here, it's cool that Shasta saw, like, oh, I can kind of play the game against him, where I can make him think that we're friends, so to speak, in order to manipulate him. And it's crazy coming from an 8-year-old girl here, but this tactic actually ends up working very well on him.
Yeah, just this guy is torturing children.
Yeah.
And they're having to watch this. Like, Shasta's having to watch her brother be tortured by this monster. And it's just, it's amazing that she's even able to think through things and to come up with this plan.
And to keep this sense of hope.
Yes.
That, like, I can get it. Weeks are passing.
Yes.
Weeks. Right. To put that in perspective, right?
This is going on for a long time.
Yeah.
It's both of them.
Right.
It's just
so the fact that she can kind of see that there's a light at the end and keep playing the cards that she can play, to hoping that she can get out of this situation, is incredible to me. But unfortunately, at some point, Joseph decided to murder Dylan. Before this, Joseph had made Dylan and Shasta play a game where he told them if either of them could catch this squirrel that had kept coming into their campsite, they could both go home. And one day, Dylan actually ended up catching the squirrel, and Joseph made them think that, congratulations, we're finally going home. But according to Shasta, she was holding Dylan's hand in celebration when Joseph shot him with the shotgun in his abdomen. Shasta then watched as her brother clutched his stomach and fell to the ground, and then Joseph went up and shot Dylan again in his head. Shasta recalled being hit by her brother's blood and pieces of his skull. Then she just completely shut down as Joseph forced her to help him burn her brother's remains. She thought she could even still hear him screaming. Just the worst thing ever. I have nothing to say to that. It's just really some of
the most traumatic thing you could possibly even imagine. It's just insane.
After the murder, Joseph then tried to convince Shasta that he accidentally shot Dylan. Then he said he murdered him to end his suffering. Joseph had also admitted to Shasta during all this that he had killed Anthony Martinez, just kind of out of the blue. And then we'll circle back to this again later. But sometime after this, Joseph asked Shasta how she would want to die. He gave her the option of either being shot or being strangled, and Shasta, thinking that she had to choose, she chose strangulation. As Joseph tightened the rope around her neck, she saw white lights in her eyes, and she said, "Please don't, Jet." The rope around her neck then loosened, and Joseph began crying, and he said he couldn't kill her because he saw God in her eyes. He also told her that she had taught him how to love. Apparently, he asked her to be his daughter and if she would come back to Washington to meet his family. So this guy is in full fantasy world right now, completely disconnected from reality. But Shasta plays into this and she agrees. But she says, there's one condition. We need to go back and drive through Coeur d'Alene so she could show him where she grew up. Things like, I think she even mentioned, like, we can go to the playground and the school where I went to, and we can go see the things because we're friends now. So you need to see kind of my backstory in order for
Which is like a survival tactic.
Yeah, really.
That they teach, in criminal justice schools and police academies and things like that, is like, if you're ever kidnapped or, in a situation like this with an abductor or something, that you want to humanize yourself to them and talk to them. And that was one of the things that was very interesting when hearing Shasta talk about her experiences, that when he gave her the choice of being, do you want to be strangled or do you want to be shot? What registered in her mind, which is incredible, is that she's like, well, if I'm shot, it's over in a split second and there's no opportunity to potentially talk my way out of it.
Right. And it's way less personal too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why she chose the strangulation route. Not that it would be a better way to die, but that she could potentially talk to him while he's doing it. And that's ultimately what happened. She talked him out of it.
The fact that this 8-year-old knew all this naturally.
Yes.
She just
her intuition.
Heard, this has, honestly incredible. And so she said, we need to go back to Coeur d'Alene. I want you to see where I grew up. And he agreed. So after 7 weeks of torture, abuse, and murder, Joseph decided to head back to Coeur d'Alene with Shasta.
But 7 weeks.
Yeah.
That's just...
God almighty.
But
she made it.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So they head back out of the Lolo area, and they go back to Coeur d'Alene, and they stopped at a local convenience store and were caught on CCTV walking the aisles. You can see Joseph and you can see Shasta. A few hours later, they went to Denny's around, I think it was like 1:32 a.m. on July 2nd, 2005. Amber Dean, a waitress, noticed a young girl sitting at a table with a strange middle-aged man. And she was like, you see some strange things at 2 a.m. at a Denny's, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so here's this two very dirty people, but let alone a young child, a young girl with this ugly motherfucker. I mean, this guy is clearly, if you saw him, you'd be like, yeah, I would have probably been like, this is very strange that this little girl's with this guy. And that's kind of like what Amber says. She's like, this is very strange. My meter,
Yeah, because it could be just a man with his daughter, but she was reading
at 2 a.m., no good dads out with their daughter at 2 a.m.
And she could tell that there was, just by their behavior,
yes,
something was also off.
So she goes over to the table and she gave Shasta some crayons and took their order. But she noticed something odd about this whole situation. As the young girl took the crayons and drew a picture of a princess, Amber noticed it looked like she hadn't bathed in a while. She also noticed that the middle-aged man was continuously staring at the young girl.
Yeah, that's weird.
So we actually have a clip of Amber talking about what happened.
The body language told what she was going through. That poor little girl was slumped down. She wasn't excited about anything. I said, honey, what's your name? She said, Shasta Groene, and she started crying, and I just picked her up. That I remember every time I give my own daughter a hug.
Obviously, her creep meter is going off. She goes over, she, takes the drink order or whatever, goes back, talks to her manager. She's like, hey, something's really odd. Something's off about this situation. They obviously have been watching the local news. There's missing posters up, billboards up for Dylan and Shasta. And so they immediately made the connection, like, this is clearly Shasta Groene.
Yeah.
This is the missing girl. And so, which is just amazing that the just Good Samaritans stepped up. They knew potentially at that point that they're dealing with a dangerous, who knows what Joseph would have done.
Right.
Had they tipped him off that they had called the police. And so they did it anyway to save Shasta. So they called the police, and here's a small snippet of the call.
Hi, friends. This is Linda, the manager at Denny's. Yes, I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like that Shasta.
Amber, the waitress, the Denny's manager, and 2 other customers at the restaurant also recognized Shasta from the media reports. and then they positioned themselves to block the exits, preventing this strange man with her from leaving the Denny's in case he tried to flee.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, just everybody stepping up in this moment. Amber then did her best to distract them at the table and made excuses for why she couldn't print the bill, because he's starting to kind of get tipped off a little bit. He's starting to see them talking and whispering, and so he knows kind of what's happening. And luckily, because they did all these things, they, prevent him from leaving and hold up his bill. Because of course, this guy's got to pay his bill, right? Because he still thinks that I don't want to tip anybody off if I just get up and leave without paying my bill. They'll call the cops for sure then.
Right.
So he's like, I got to pay my bill, which has actually worked out in their favor. But not only was the man most likely a kidnapper, but from the news, many were familiar with what had happened to Shasta's family. So they also knew that this could potentially be their killer. Her family home had been broken into before she was kidnapped. Her mother, her mother's fiance, and her older brother were bludgeoned to death in the middle of the night. Shasta and her brother Dylan were kidnapped and hadn't been seen for nearly 7 weeks. So soon after, the police arrived at the Denny's and they rolled up without lights or sirens on because they want to take them by surprise. They want to prevent this from getting worse, right? And they quietly entered the restaurant and almost acted like they were just customers there. The middle-aged man at the table then tried to ask Amber for the check again. He tried to get Shasta to go to the bathroom, but the officers then approached him and they're like, hey man, let's talk to you. Can we talk to you outside real quick? He agreed, and then that's when they took Joseph into custody without issue. And it was very soon after that they identified 42-year-old Joseph Edward Duncan III, convicted sex offender, and he was on the run from a child charge in Minnesota. And this arrest finally put an end to his lifelong rap sheet of sexual assaults and murders. Amber then kept Shasta company inside the restaurant and told her it was going to be okay. Unfortunately, police noticed very quickly that there was no sign of Shasta's brother, 9-year-old Dylan Groene. When Shasta was taken to the hospital, her father, Steve, was notified that she was found. And of course, this is the best news he could have possibly ever heard. And he raced over to reunite with her. And this was the first time in seeing her for weeks and had no idea what she had gone through. Her grandmother, Darlene, on her mother's side also came to see her. There's some great photos of them being reunited. Just amazing.
Yeah. Police searched Joseph's stolen rental Jeep and discovered various weapons, a video camera, a laptop, a flash drive, and a GPS device. Joseph had actually recorded the captivity and abuse of Shasta and her brother. And from the GPS device, police actually hoped they were able to find Dylan's location, thinking he was possibly still alive somewhere. They also saw that Joseph had been traveling through other residential areas to possibly capture other potential victims, which is disturbing. I mean, because we were kind of saying okay, he's going back to Coeur d'Alene to get caught. But then there was also potential he might have just kept up the picking up victims throughout.
I can't remember how many waypoints he had on his GPS, but it was a lot. It was crazy. He was all over the town.
Yeah.
Scoping out potential victims.
Yeah. After being assessed by doctors at the hospital, Shasta informed the police that, unfortunately, Joseph had already murdered her brother, Dylan. Luckily, she was ready and willing to talk to the police and give them any information that she could remember, and she said that Dylan might be out in the Lolo National Forest area. As for Joseph, he refused to speak to the police while in custody. Shasta later returned to the Montana woods to help the police find her brother's remains. She kept her eyes closed during the ride there, trying to recall every bump along the road to identify the locations.
So incredible.
I know. She was really
She
smart.
takes them
kid.
back to where they were taken to.
Yeah. And on July 10th, 2005, police found Dylan's remains and sent them to an FBI lab in Quantico, and that's where they identified him. Since Joseph had crossed state lines, his crimes now became a federal case. And if he wasn't eligible for capital punishment in the federal court, the prosecution could still seek the death penalty in the state court.
In the state, the citizens wanted him dead.
They had, there were signs around town like this one, Muffins and Donuts. Duncan, welcome to Idaho, a death penalty state. May you get your wish and die. And then even outside the family home, in Wolf Lodge Bay, it says absolutely no trespassing outside. There's a sign just at the edge of the property. And then right next to that, it says, absolutely kill Duncan. So yeah, people were pretty rabid about him getting the death penalty. In October 2006, in Idaho State Court, he pleaded guilty to the murders of Brenda, Mark, and Slade. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences. In December of 2007, in federal court, Joseph pleaded guilty to kidnapping resulting in death, sexual exploitation of a child resulting in death, and using a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence resulting in death, as well as kidnapping, sexual abuse of a minor, and several other charges regarding firearms and a stolen vehicle. He insisted on pleading guilty to all of his crimes and confessed to every single one of them, but investigators warned that his confessions couldn't necessarily be trusted since he was known to manipulate others and lie, which is why we have mostly avoided even saying what he said in his confessions, because God knows what is truth and what isn't when it comes to him, which is why most of this is all Shasta's account of everything. And knowing how honest and bright she was, those are the accounts that can be trusted. There was also more than enough evidence to convict him for the crimes, so they didn't even need his confessions, really. He was also charged with the murder of 10-year-old Anthony Martinez after confessing. And what's crazy is that Joseph's fingerprints matched a partial print on duct tape used to bind Anthony. If you remember, they had found that one single fingerprint on the front door of the Groene's family home, and that is how they connected those 2 crimes, because they were like, this guy's a liar. We can't just take his confession and make it guilty. So they actually connected him to the crime scene through that partial fingerprint.
And in addition to that, they had an eyewitness from when Anthony was abducted,
right?
Because if you remember, he was luring all the kids,
a bunch of kids,
with money to look for his cat. And so they actually got a really good look at him, and so the police actually had a sketch of this guy, and sure enough, it is picture perfect to Joseph Duncan.
Spot on.
It's the same guy.
Yeah. So it's cool that they had eyewitness and they had the physical evidence. That's incredible. So Judge David B. Downing said, quote, "I have never met a more evil person than Joseph Duncan." I think in a lot of cases we've covered too, it's like you could say that about a lot of people, but I actually think this may be the most evil person we've covered at least in a long time.
He's up there, man. It's no remorse, no nothing. There's no
completely evil.
No, he enjoyed every bit of this.
Yeah. Oh. In April 2008, 12 jurors were chosen to decide whether Duncan would either spend life in prison or receive the death penalty. Joseph wanted to represent himself, which created the possibility that he would be questioning Shasta on the stand, which that was a big concern. He was later ruled mentally competent and allowed to represent himself, but they did not use Shasta. She did not testify in this. Instead, taped interviews with Shasta were used extensively in court because she said everything that she needed to say to the police. So they just used that instead of having her out there. She explained in great detail her horrific experiences with Joseph. This was very controversial. They also played the video footage that Joseph had taken of torturing and abusing the children, even though Steve Groene, the father, protested the showing of the evidence. And while they showed this, Joseph was actually seen covering his face as the video played. This is kind of crazy to me. I agree with Steve in this situation, but here's the news coverage of that moment.
Steve Groene stormed out of the courtroom this morning as Judge Edward Lodge warned everyone that federal prosecutors were about to play a very graphic video. During the recess, Groene aggressively asked a number of people to not go in the courtroom if they weren't essential to the court hearing. He then gave a graphic gesture almost as a warning. More than 10 people left the courtroom right before federal prosecutors played 3 graphic videos. Outside the court door, Steve Groene demanded the windows to the court be covered, and they were. Steve was overheard saying he wanted to know the name of every person in the court, adding he wanted everyone who watched the video who was not essential to the court hearing arrested for viewing child pornography. Steve also talked about wanting to make a citizen's arrest. Duncan also objected to the video, saying, quote, "It will be turning the jury into my victims, and I will be tried not by a jury of my peers, but by my victims." Steve also got into a brief argument with a sketch artist who did not go back into the courtroom. Steve later apologized. Reporting in Boise, Annie Bishop, KXLY4 HD News.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is the only case I've ever come across where something like this has happened.
Yeah, and I don't know why there isn't a law to
What on
forbid
earth?
this. Yeah, why do we even need this in the courtroom?
They're that worried that they're not going to be able to convince a jury of this guy's
Right.
crimes that they need to show them?
Yeah, give me
What?
a break. Yeah,
Like a video?
the video.
Like, that's insane.
yeah. Also, I would as a juror, I would protest.
Like, I don't want to.
No,
That's traumatizing.
I'd be like,
yeah.
throw me out of this case entirely. I am not going to be
I
watching.
can't
this.
believe they did that.
Yeah.
The judge let that happen. Like, good God.
So
I'd be questioning that judge. I'd be like, the hell, dude?
I know, and like props to Steve for calling out
Damn.
everybody sitting in on the courtroom. You
Yeah.
could just be sitting there in the courtroom. I was flabbergasted by this aspect of the case and completely disgusted by this. And if you can maybe just imagine kind of the fury that we have towards this, amplify it by 100.
Yeah,
Imagine
and
being
it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
If there's some reporting on what the footage was out there.
yeah.
And it's just I happen to run across it, and I wish I didn't. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's just
It's disgusting.
to know that they were watching this is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And the footage was actually so horrific that it caused several jurors to cry.
It's sick.
Yeah. In August of 2008, the jury determined that Joseph was eligible for the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to death for the murder of Dylan Groene.
Which the only thing I can think of is they felt like they needed to show that to secure the death penalty conviction.
Man,
But even then, I'm
really-
like, there wasn't enough from everything else.
Or, I mean, you could have even distilled what was in the footage in just to put it up in words. And like, why do we need to see that as a jury? That makes no sense to me. And it's actually the one thing that I do agree with, even as disgusting and evil as Joseph Duncan III is. Yeah, you just victimized everybody in the courtroom.
He probably likes that.
If anything, yeah. It's so disturbing.
He was, if you remember the quote, he was more worried that he was going to be tried by his victims.
Yeah.
Not that they were going to watch this horrible actions that he did. No, he's like, oh, I'm not going to get a fair trial.
Right, yeah.
That's all he cares about.
Of course
at
he's
the end of the
thinking
day.
about it that way. But he's correct in assuming that these are now victims.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre to me. Joseph was also extradited to California, where he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 11 consecutive sentences of life without parole for the 1997 murder of Anthony Martinez. So that case was officially wrapped up. That family, it was years after the fact, but they ended up...
They had nothing. It just, that case was cold as can be. And nothing but a sketch. And then Anthony's remains.
Yep. And that was it. And he had also confessed to murdering sisters Sammy Jo White and Carmen Cubillas in 2005, but he was not prosecuted for these crimes. A King County Sheriff's spokesman said there was no physical evidence connecting Joseph to the case. And, as we know, as we've been saying throughout the whole episode, Joseph was a manipulator. We can't trust his confessions. They didn't trust his confessions. They needed that physical evidence. They didn't have an eyewitness. They had really nothing connecting him to that case. So that went nowhere. And I believe that is still a cold case to this day. But after the fact, here's Shasta on what she thought the right punishment for Joseph was.
I agree with the death penalty, but I wish it was kind of more like the older days death penalties. I think that, I guess, I know that two wrongs don't make a right, but I think that he should be able to feel what he put others through.
I have to agree with Shasta here for Duncan.
This is one of those cases where you wish you could just take this guy out.
Yeah, this is just some Wild West justice. Yeah.
Here's an interview of Steve while Joseph's death penalty was still stuck in the appeals process for years, because of course it was. And just a heads up, he's speaking through a voice box due to surgery he had from lung cancer.
Yeah, until they fry him, there won't be any closure anyway. And God willing, I'll be around for that, because I'll be sitting front row center. And if I'm not around for that, then I'll have even better seats.
Damn.
Wow. So badass. That's great. I like how he put that.
Yeah, it's just the whole death penalty thing is just such a fucking...
It's a mess.
But Joseph's brother, Bruce Duncan, he died from a heart aneurysm on July 31st, 2006 at 41 years old, and many suggest he died after being overwrought with the stress brought on from his brother's crimes. He was often taunted at the warehouse where he worked over his connection with Joseph. Some kids told his goddaughter that their mothers wouldn't let them play with her, and what he read on the internet about his brother destroyed him. Bruce is sometimes considered Joseph's lesser-known victim. So it impacts the whole family.
I know. I don't often think about that, but the actual perpetrator's family, I sometimes you don't consider.
Yeah. Well, with these infamous serial killers, serial predators, I mean, it's when it becomes, I mean, this was a big media story when it happened. So this was big news, and anybody with that name related to Joseph, I mean, is going to be impacted by it more ways than one, right?
Yeah.
On July 16, 2005, what would have been Dylan's 10th birthday, more than 700 people attended his funeral. It was held at the same church that his mother and older brother's funeral took place at. Both the pastor and Steve Groene called for stricter laws against sex offenders at the funeral. After the abduction, Shasta went to live with her father, Steve, and although she was happy to be home, she really struggled to process her experience, as you can imagine. She later fell into patterns of substance abuse and had run-ins with the law, but ultimately she was able to get help in a juvenile detention center for over a year and went on to lead a fulfilling life. When she got out, she got pregnant with her first child, which gave her the motivation to turn her life around. And one of her role models, another incredible human being, Elizabeth Smart, who had been abducted in Utah and went on to become a child safety activist. I actually got the pleasure of meeting Elizabeth Smart.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Really, really cool individual, very inspiring individual.
Yeah.
It was at the National Center for Exploited Missing Children Gala a couple years ago.
That's cool.
Yeah, her story is incredible as well. In 2015, 10 years after her rescue, 19-year-old Shasta told her story of survival to KTVB during an in-depth interview. So here's Shasta talking about how she's tried to put everything behind her and just process what happened.
Like, if you're thinking about him on a daily basis and all the wrong that he's done, like, there's, he's winning, you know what I mean? And if he's obviously hurting you and making you feel like that still, and he's, in prison and he can't hurt you anymore, then he's still victimizing you, and that's what he wants. And so when someone said that, I was like, oh my God, you're so right. Like, I can't think about it like that anymore. And so I pushed and got that help, and it's just kind of like I got to a point where it's just like, I don't care who he is, and he's not on my mind, every day, and I don't really, what he had done was done, and it was wrong. And like, I got to the point where, like, him as a person does not make me feel bad for who I am, and so by that, he doesn't define my life anymore. I have things that I need to focus on for my future, and he's definitely not going to be a part of my future.
She looks at this pregnancy, her baby boy, as her symbol of hope.
I guess for a long time, like, I always had this feeling that I could not have kids. So, like, now in that way, when I think of, I am going to have a baby, I still know that just Duncan did not do damage to me that is lifelong. You know what I mean? Obviously, emotionally, yes, there are going to be those things, because I'm always going to miss my mom, or I'm always going to miss my family, but he did not make a permanent mark on my life. And that's just good to know that I can still bring life into this world and not have to have that hate in my heart for someone that I don't even need in my life anymore. So
he didn't steal that from you.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. I mean, he stole my innocence and he stole my family from me, but he's not going to steal the fact that I can, bring children into this world, and that makes me really happy.
Your resilience, your strength, coming out of this. I think a lot of people say, how can anyone get through that? How can anyone survive it? You've probably heard that several times. How do you do it? How have you done it?
I think that it's just kind of, I know that I lived for a reason, and I know that there's a reason that I'm on this planet still, and that I know that I'm here to help other people. So whenever I feel like giving up, especially now, I feel like if I give up, I have my son there and he's going to see me give up, and I can't let that happen. If there's anybody in the world right now that's being abused and they hear that I'm giving up, what would that do for them?
God, to come out of all this with that mindset is just incredible. So inspiring, man.
Yeah.
She went on to get married in 2018 and then went on to have 5 sons of her own, because that interview was at least a few years back.
Yeah.
It's been a few years since then, but
yeah, that was 2015, I believe, was the interview.
Yeah, 10 years, yeah. But in 2019, Steve Groene sadly passed away at the age of 62 from stage 4 lung cancer. And in March 2021, the monster Joseph Edward Duncan III died at 58 years old while still on death row. Was not executed.
Yeah.
His official cause of death was not disclosed, but he reportedly had terminal brain cancer. Reportedly, the state paid for him to have surgery to remove a tumor, even though he had refused chemotherapy. So there we are, having to pay to treat this monster as he just sits on death row.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, many felt a great sense of relief after his death. After his death, Shasta Groene said this, quote, "Yes, Joseph Duncan is gone now, but it doesn't bring our loved ones back. It doesn't ease the aching pain of moments that they should be there. And they aren't because of the selfishness of one person. One thing is for sure, he does not exist anymore. Now we can live our lives knowing that. For so long, I've been struggling with hate towards that man, and today I woke up feeling like my soul was finally free. I hope other people affected by Joseph Duncan were able to wake up feeling the same way. I wanted to thank everyone who spent countless hours, days, and weeks searching for us, bringing awareness to our situation, and praying for us. The continued support for me and my family does not go unnoticed, and for that, I am extremely thankful." She also been thinking of the Martinez family and the families of Duncan's other victims, saying, "If I could, I would hug them all." This year, Shasta says she learned to wear her trauma like armor. Shasta was able to tell her whole story in the book, Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home, which was written by Greg Olson, published August 1st, 2025. So this is fresh off the press. Yeah. Definitely go support and pick up her book. I'm sure there's so much more insight and so much more that we couldn't have possibly covered in this one episode.
Yeah. She really says this book is her whole story. So yeah, if you're more interested in this case, definitely.
She also said, quote, "I want other survivors to know that they aren't alone, that feeling broken is okay, and that healing isn't about feeling quote unquote better. It's about trying to keep going even when everything around you seems to tell you to give up. That's enough. Healing isn't beautiful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but within the pain lies power, the knowledge that you're moving forward."
I love that quote. Healing isn't beautiful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. That's a great quote.
It's so true. So true. But, the only proper way to end an episode like this is with some clips of Shasta talking about her mom, of course, Dylan and Slade. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode there and kind of lead you out with some final thoughts and remarks from Shasta herself. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Lights Out. We'll see you guys next time.
I do remember my mom loved music. She loved listening to music and doing karaoke and singing and, just stuff like that. And I think that's carried on, with me. We were just dancing around the living room.
What about Dylan? Do you have a lot of good memories of your childhood together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Dylan were only 16 months apart. We were just very, very close, and we loved, riding bikes and, being on a scooter or just even going to the store with my mom. Me and him were just like very attached to my mom.
And of course, we can't leave out Slade and honor him. What memories do you have of him?
I remember that me and him used to butt heads so much because he was so much older and he wanted to do things with my older brothers, and we always wanted him to play with us.
After her rescue, Shasta released balloons on Slade's birthday. She talked about her big brother that day.
He was just a really good brother to me, and that he was really sweet to people. Happy birthday, and tell Mom, Dylan, and Mark I love them and stuff, and that hopefully we'll get to see them again.
If I ever think about like the bad memories of things that I've seen, it does kind of push them away. But I keep them close. I pray, and I pray. Sometimes I talk to them when I'm having a hard time, or I talk to them in my head sometimes, or I just think about their faces a lot. And I have dreams about my mom a lot, so I think that's what keeps her close. And I do have that tattoo of my mom where just like I feel like she's always with me, and they're just always close. So this says, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. The book that my mom used to read had this little quote in there, and she'd always sing it to me.
One day, Shasta wants her son to know about the family that she lost.
I want him to know that, that he has a grandma in heaven that watches him and, just wants the best for him. And I want him to know that he has guardian angels that are always going to constantly be looking over him and being there for him.